welcome to the Archery Geek Outdoors podcast. Good evening, one and all. Welcome to episode 57 of the Archery Geek Outdoors podcast. First tonight, I don't know if you picked that up, we've got the dogs going berserk outside here. Episode 57, privileged to be joined by the one, the only, Coach Angel Garcia of High Power Archery Podcast and High Power Archery. And it's a first for both of us. We're actually recording video. I reckon if we put it up on Halloween, we could have it. We could have the ultimate scary movie here, Angel. What do you think?
You got that right. That's why I avoid video most of the time.
Oh, same here. I don't photograph or video at all well. And what we're going to be doing tonight, we're both going to have a stokie.
Yes, we are.
So I've got a friend that owns a cigar lounge in Derby, does the most amazing cigars. When he said we'll have a cigar, I hadn't got time to get there. Couldn't get into Birmingham to a decent cigar place, so I've had to have the ubiquitous Hamlet. Folks in the UK, did they ever sell Hamlet in the States?
I think they do, and it's known as a gas station cigar. Whatever you can find at a gas station.
It is. What it is. It's like I've been outside with a bloody pickaxe, chunked up a piece of bitumen out the road and just set fire to it. And as I haven't got an ashtray since I've been off the cigarette since end of February, top of a spare arrow tube for an ashtray.
Hey, whatever works. I mean, I'm not that fancy either. I have a bucket nearby I dump my ash into. So as in archery, whatever works for you is what you use.
Yeah, we look at your cigar and this looks, I feel, totally inadequate compared to that behemoth that you've got.
It's not a little skinny thing. Jake, think of yours as the X10 of cigars, and mine is the 27 diameter of cigars. That's all.
Hey, horses for courses. Some like them long and thin, some like them short and fat.
Oh, I am not going there. Just leave that one alone for now.
Wait till I've had a few of these. Right, tonight we're going to be talking about arrows, of course, episode 56. I was on about, I'm trying to get one arrow to do everything. I'm settling on the 244, 245, 246. I mean, what's 2,000 between friends? Diameter. Good old 6 mil.
Yeah.
I've actually ordered a dozen Skyline Edge shafts. Fuck me. I'm notoriously tight. I'm so tight you can shove a lump of coal up my arse and in 2 hours flat you got a diamond. I mean, I'm tighter than a duck's arse.
Wow.
And that's watertight. But 39 quid for a dozen shafts with inserts and knocks. It's about what? Current exchange rate, $46, $47 for a dozen shafts.
Wow. That's cheap. That's inexpensive, I'll tell you that. And the whole thing is with arrows, most people think that you get better archery through aggressive spending. Such is not the case at all, but the manufacturers don't want you to hear that, of course.
Well, the only reason I'm giving these a try is I've been really impressed with the Empros and the Instex. I'd put them over an arrow analyzer, and they were so close to tolerances on Victory's Elite ranges. I'm thinking, why do I want to pay 150 quid for a dozen shafts when I can get these for like 39 quid for a dozen? You know, it's like...
Well, that's... Yeah.
It's a
that's
no-brainer.
Something big time.
But,
well, the thing is that most people, you know, unfortunately in today's day and age, whatever they see going on YouTube, well, this guy's using this arrow and this guy's using that arrow and this bow hunting guy, he will only use this. Okay, great. Realize one thing. Cost is not going to be an issue for a lot of those people because they're getting them for free.
Oh, God damn you.
If you're getting it for free, you can afford to have anything. It doesn't make a difference. But when you're as I say, when you're the regular person who's going out there and having to spend your money and you only have so many funds available to you, there's no reason to be shut out and say, well, I guess I can't do anything at all because I don't have the money to go and get these things. When in fact, like you're seeing with the Skylines, inexpensive and they work great. The same thing. A lot of people use the Eastons, and there's nothing wrong with Easton shafts. I use Black Eagle. I've used them because they're reliable. They offer every size, and they don't break the bank. I think they only have one arrow that's really, really expensive, and that's their Revelation that they use for target archery. But like I was telling you before we got on here, I deal with a lot of kids. Actually, I only deal with kids these days because they're all my students and they're all competing. And the thing is, you tell me when a kid can barely afford for the parents to get them a bow to get started and all that, how in the hell are they going to go ahead and spend $600 on a dozen arrows? And in fact, and we'll get into this a little bit, the difference between a 001 and a 003 is not that big. Not big enough for you to notice as a regular person. For a professional archer, and I shot pro for many years, it still really doesn't make a difference. But because they sell it as this, it may make a difference to maybe the top 2 or 3 people in the world. But you've listened to Stephen Hand. He is the most honest guy in the world. He's going to say, it doesn't matter, because he'll shoot 003, 005, and they go to the same place. They do exactly the same thing. I can't see a difference. That's what he always says, because there is none.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's all in how you prep the arrow shaft.
Some of the archery companies must hate Stephen Hand because he just tells it like it is. You know, he doesn't call a spade, he calls it a fucking shovel.
So, and they can't say, well, he's just saying that and there's nothing really to back up what he's saying, because he just set another national record in Australia. So, I mean, he's setting records with what he's using, and he's not using the most expensive thing in the world. It's just not. He's been in this sport long enough to know what is real and what isn't. And unfortunately, hype is not real. Hype is just, it looks nicer. Big deal. Who cares?
Yeah.
But you can do the same thing with any shaft. I mean, I've got kids that come to me with shafts that they bought in Walmart. And they're like, well, I don't know if I can use this to compete. I'm like, yeah, we'll fix it up and you'll be able to. It's all about what you put into it. And quite honestly, right out of the box, most of the stuff they buy is just fine. But I see a lot of people who get really, really obsessed about this sort of thing. And I know a few of them. So my whole thing has always been help people do the stuff on their own. Let them see what's real and what's not. If you can afford the better stuff, great. If you can't, it's okay too, because you can still use this. So as long as they understand those concepts, then you'll be happy. But if you're going to obsess about, I'm not using what this guy's using on TV or on YouTube, so I'm less than, like, no, you're not. You've got to get that out of your head.
Yeah. Oh, Lord, yeah.
So that's a very, very big thing. But you brought up a lot of interesting points on your last podcast. And I don't know if you realized it. You may have been the one who triggered it. But as we approach September, especially here in the States, everybody who does an archery podcast starts doing arrow podcasts.
Oh, my God.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk
there
about
is
that.
major beef going on at the moment, isn't there, over your side of the pond on YouTube? Everybody's weighing in.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I'd never been a Dudley fanboy. I like John Dudley. I love the fact that he doesn't gatekeep anything to do with archery. He wants to get it all out there. But he's done a whole series of videos on arrows. Who else weighed in? Brian Call from Gritty, he's weighed in on it. MFJJ's weighed in on it. It's like, of course, Ranch Fairy's weighed in. But the one thing that gets me about when folks are slagging off Troy at Ranch Fairy, the first thing he says is, make sure your bow's tuned. And I'm building these super heavy arrows for Plan B shots when I'm shooting hogs at 17 yards. And you get folks say, oh, that won't fly for me at 80 yards out west. He's not talking about shooting them at fucking 80 yards. He's talking about shooting big-ass armour-plated pigs at 17 fucking yards out of a hide or a tree stand. You know, and there's so many people taking this the wrong way.
Well, the whole thing is, every year around this time of year, sometimes it goes a little later, they start the whole FOC thing, like, well, I've got to have an FOC of 31%. No, I've got to have an FOC of 18. And the thing is, you got to find what works for you. But I hate it when people start criticizing guys like the Ranch Fairy, because Troy's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And they make fun of him like, well, he's an idiot. He's talking about this. It's really silly. He is used to bringing people on a ranch and helping them out over there where they have to be prepared for anything. So would you rather have, the guy's going to go and shoot at a pig with his regular setup that's very light, because in the States, I'm sure as everywhere else, speed is king. They want to have speed, speed, speed. So if I can't shoot 350 feet a second, hint, hint, there isn't a bow that does it, then I don't want it. Then the arrow's too heavy. I see it at competitions. Guys who go for 3D competitions, and they're shooting crazy light arrows so they can get a flat trajectory.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's context,
That's not
isn't it?
safe or smart.
It's context.
Yes, it really is.
If you're shooting sub 20 yards, you can go as heavy as you want, because the drop-off's not going to be noticeable. If you've got to take Western shot out to 80 yards, you're going to want something a little faster that's got a, what was it, Dudley called it, cast, that's got better cast. I mean, I didn't realise just how much work Dudley's done with arrows, and listening to the latest round of podcasts and the videos he's done, it's really opened my eyes to the amount of work the guy's done. I don't know if you've heard the one he did with, is it James L. Park? The guy from Australia who's got a doctorate in arrow flight. But this is all from target-based, isn't it?
Well, yeah, and the thing is that when you're discussing these things, there has to be delineation. Are you talking target or are you talking hunting?
Yeah.
Because they are two completely different worlds. And unfortunately, people try to combine, and even talking 3D, you're talking about stuff that's completely different and separate, different purpose, different scenario. And you can't interchange them, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Now, what you can do is, if you're the type of guy who's going to shoot 3D on the weekends and stuff like that and still want to be able to hunt, you can find a middle ground. And what you're saying is perfectly right. If that's what you want to do, you can come up with an arrow that works for everything.
Yeah.
And it'll work for everything within reason. Now, it'll work for target shooting 3D. You can get one to shoot relatively flat and relatively accurate and not have a problem. Remember, most of it comes down to you, the shooter, not so much the arrow.
Yeah.
You can put a lot into it, or you can put a little bit into it. The big thing that I preach to everybody is you need to test whatever you're going to do. Don't take it as gospel when you put an arrow in your bow because someone says, use this, or someone saying, this is the greatest thing since cheese. You know, I always say that. Yep. You got to use this. It means nothing, because what works for them may not work for you. Now, the best example of this is Tim Gillingham. That man is a master of everything coming into arrows. You sit down with him, take notes, because the man will teach you more about arrows in an hour than you could possibly learn in your life as a whole.
He's the original mad scientist.
He's I hear a lot of people call him that, and I don't like the term mad scientist. That implies that he doesn't know what he's doing, or he's some sort of quackery.
Maybe bad choice of words then.
Well, no, you're not the only one who says that about him. They're like, well, he's the upset genius who comes up with all these different things. Yes, he does. And sometimes he'll get into real knockdown, drag out debates with whoever he's on a podcast with. Well, and he'll just be like, okay, that's great that you think that, but you're stupid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, for saying that. And it's not because he doesn't agree with what they're saying. But a lot of it comes into the context of, remember who you're talking about when you're talking about him. You're talking about a guy who has a 32-inch draw length. That's number one. Speed is never going to be a thing for him.
Oh, God,
because his speed is unlimited because of that draw length. Two, he preaches using mechanical broadheads as opposed to fixed blades and stuff like that, in a hunting scenario, because at his draw length, number one, it's got more power behind it than anything else. But two, and people always forget this, he can pinpoint where he wants to put that arrow.
Yeah.
The guy is a professional archer. At 100 yards, he'll take a 2-inch little circle like this and pop it right in there. So he has command of where it's going to go.
Actually, you saying that you saying that, one of Dudley's Instagram reels, and he dropped it over onto YouTube, was he called it Chasing Ghosts. And I'm guilty of this. So, I mean, when I get these arrows, I've ordered some Eastern Bully Veins, the new ones, which are made by Boning. I believe they're made out of the X3 material, so they're mega stiff. Because I found blazers, there's a bit of flutter and a lot of noise. I'm going to fletch some with the X3 veins, some with the bullies, and see what gives me best fly to distance. But Dudley was on about people chasing ghosts. They'll spend hours and hours and hours and hours perfecting arrows, and I'm guilty as it because I just like doing it. But he said all those hours you spend chasing ghosts with arrows, you're not a good enough shot to notice the difference. The hours you put into testing this shit, get out there and shoot, rather than sit there spending 10 hours watching YouTube videos on what's the best fletching. Spend 10 hours practicing your shooting to make yourself more accurate. And I've got to admit, that makes perfect sense. You cannot argue with that, can you? Because I am not going to, even a cheap set of arrows, I am not skillful enough to outshoot them. The likes of Gillingham, maybe, Mikey Schlosser, John Dudley, they can all tell the difference. They're good enough. They've put enough arrows down.
They can tell the difference for them because they've been doing it for so many years.
Yeah.
And Dudley's been there since the beginning. Okay. I mean, I'll tell you, I've been around for, I took stock of this year, and one of my students' parents says, "How long have you been shooting a bow?" And I said, "Wow." And I sat back for a second. I said, a lot longer than I like to admit.
Yeah.
In November, it will be 49 years. I've been shooting a bow.
Fuck me backwards. That's a lot of experience.
I started when I was 4 years old. And I still remember, because it was the day after my birthday that I picked up my first bow. And that's a long story, but whatever. So I've been shooting bows for 49 years. So I've been shooting since back before when compounds came out. Dudley was right there at the beginning when the compounds came out. So he's seen the development of everything. He's been there at the Arrow Company. He's worked for manufacturers. He worked for Matthews for a very long time. Yeah. And people lose sight of that a lot. So
I knew none of this until his podcasts. And it was like, fuck me. I always thought the guy was just a genius marketer and a good archer, but he's not. He's been so far down every one of those fucking rabbit holes. He's needed a miner's helmet and light.
The difference with Dudley is he did his own TV show. He's the first person who ever came out with an instructional thing in between his TV shows, and a lot of people forget that, or they may not have been around long enough to remember that. So he tried to bring it to the masses, and that, frankly, pissed off a lot of people because it's supposed to be the pro shop you go to. Unfortunately, most pro shops you go to are not professional at anything they sell. They don't really have skill sometimes, with the exception of MFJJ, which if you're fortunate enough to live near his shop, then you're actually getting professional advice from somebody. But unfortunately, these days, that's few and far between.
Well, he's another one that won't gatekeep anything. He wants people to be able to work on their own bows, doesn't he? To be able to get them to shoot perfect so they can introduce more people into archery. Guys playing the long game, the more people get into it, the more successful his business is.
Yeah, it is. And here, so like he'll make the thing is that no product that he has on his website is not something that he's not showed people how to use or talked about on his, on his podcast. The thing with him is that he wants everyone to learn how to do stuff, but he wants them to learn the right way.
Yeah.
So that's part of, like right now, what I'm doing is I'm getting up in years, and like I say, you never know from one day to the next. You're happy to wake up every morning. I put it like that.
Yeah.
Especially when you've been through kind of nonsense I've been through. So I've started recording different things that eventually will wind up on my YouTube channel, but editing's a pain in the ass. But we're doing that because I want to have like a reference library that people can look at, and it's simple. It's not big video production or anything like that. And they can learn how to do things themselves.
Yeah.
Archery is one of the sports that up until recently, has been different from every other one, because if you're into RC planes or RC cars, radio control stuff, you know everything about it. You learn how to work on your own little engines. You learn how to do all that. Up until recently, archery was never like that. Archery was limited to what they did for you at the pro shop, walk away, good. And until something goes wrong, you never see the pro shop again.
Yeah.
Now people are starting to bring that home. And that has both good and bad with it, because it's good that they learn how to be independent and learn how to do their own stuff. You don't rely on somebody. That's why all of my kids learn how to shoot, but they also learn how to work on their own bows. I would say, and this is not, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not tooting my own hat or my own horn or anything like that, but my kids learn as much about their bows and tuning as they do about shooting.
Yeah.
So they're more proficient at working on their own stuff than if they walked into some pro shop. And I'm telling you, they can run circles around the people in pro shops, because they have more skill, because they rely on it every day.
Yeah.
And eventually I'd like to see everybody like that. But unfortunately with YouTube, the stupidity that you see out there, it's really bad trying to get people to understand.
Everybody's favorite female influencer.
Oh God.
Anthony's
and
favorite.
She's been quiet lately. She's been quiet lately. I haven't seen a lot of her.
I
which
haven't
has been
actually.
It's a godsend in more than one ways. But again, people got to learn how to do this. So besides doing the videos and stuff like that, I had a really rough time, over the last year and a half, how it's been. So I'm kind of rushing to put all the stuff together. And I also figured out that I have to have some way so that if something should go on and happen to me, which no one lives forever, okay, that people can go back and say, okay, this is how you do this. This is how you do this. But also a place where they can go and they can shoot and do that sort of thing. So I'm working with somebody right now here on Staten Island, and we're making the only and in New York City, this will be the only indoor range that does everything. I'll put some details about that out later, but it's not about a money thing. This is about giving kids a place where they can go and they can shoot after school. They can do whatever they want to do. It's not overly crazy expensive or anything like that. But at the same time, I'm going to be doing seminars there. Like, this is how you work on this. This is how you work on that. Right now, the only seminars you can find, if you want to go live and in person, they're held every few months. Like Griv, George Wiles is one of the ones who does those seminars. Yeah. But they're incredibly expensive and they're few and far between. So the average person can't find a place to go and learn hands-on. And as great as YouTube can be, and Dudley is a master of doing it, seeing something on video and being there and actually touching it with your own hands and doing it yourself are two different things.
I'll tell you what really showed that to me. When I was watching deer butchery videos, this is going to sound a bit gross, but it's true. They'd say, right, you pop the rectum out and you'd see this hand flash around the deer's asshole, and it's like, how the fuck did they do that? I haven't got the foggiest what they're doing. When I went and did a butchery course and you're actually stood there watching somebody slice out a deer's arsehole, it pops into place. But that's another thing that when you're there watching it being done in person, it's totally different to watching it being done on video, where you can't... Yeah. I don't know, it's a bit gross talking about deer's arseholes, but, well, you'll know this, because, you're a Hunter's Ed. You're a Hunter's Ed instructor, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And my girls, so a good portion of my girls do hunt. And I have one girl, her name is Casey, and she's been studying with me on and off. And I only say on and off because as she's gotten older, it's harder for her to get here. They live in New Jersey. So I might see them once or twice a month, but whatever, when I do work with them, it's hardcore learning, doing everything. And I was the first one to take her out hunting the first time. And she's 15 now. And I think she's killed more deer than the average person that's out there hunting for 30 years. Jesus. She averages about six or seven deer a year. She kills trophy bucks that on some of these TV shows would be, oh my God, look at that thing. But it's nothing to her. It's just like, it's regular. It's not a fanfare thing. But she also, one of the things I taught her, like, when you take this down, okay, fine, you got to learn how to gut the deer. You got to learn how to butcher the deer. Because it was her dad who said, listen, this is getting expensive, because at first she was 13.
Yeah.
And in that year, she killed 6 deer.
Jesus.
13 years old. So what the dad would do is after she got the deer, we'd help them gut it, whatever, and then they take it to a butcher for processing. Well, some of the butchers charge $75 or $100 to process the deer. So I said, listen, think about your dad, think about your parents. I know you want to fill every freezer you got, and I think they're up to like 4 freezers. But you're going to have to learn how to butcher your own deer. She goes, well, why haven't you taught me that yet? I'm like, I'm going to do that now. That was last year, and she's gone from slowly learning how to do it, where right now she can break down a deer and debone it in about an hour and 10 minutes.
Wow.
She get it completely done, packed out, and she knows what every piece of meat is and all that. It's absolutely incredible. The thing is that this should not be the odd in the bunch. This should be the norm for people. And it's all about being hands-on.
These are life skills, aren't they? And it's putting you in touch with where your food's come from. You're not just wandering into the supermarket and thinking, oh, that's a piece of meat. Where the fuck's that come from? It really does put you in touch with your food, and it makes you When I did that butchery course, the gamekeeper came in, dropped the carcasses off. We were showed how to inspect them. Over here, they call it gralloching, gutting.
Yeah.
And how to butcher them. And I took half a deer home with me. Fuck me, if that wasn't the nicest tasting meat ever. When you're invested in your food like that, it really does make you appreciate it.
And what happens is it often, this is going down a little bit of a rabbit hole, but what it'll do is once you invest into doing that yourself, and when I invest, I don't mean spending money. I mean, you're committed to doing this and you realize what you're getting out of it.
Yeah.
You want to do it more and more. And suddenly going and seeing a package of meat in the supermarket that these days is outrageously priced. And like you said, you don't know where it comes from. Yeah. You don't know what it was fed or anything like that. Like, you don't want anything to do with it anymore. You're like, I'd rather have deer meat the whole year. And they do the same thing with boars and pigs and the whole 9 yards. But the idea is that now you have control over what you're putting on your plate, and it actually works out to be a lot less expensive if you do something like that. Yeah. In much the same way, I'm trying to get people to look at archery and working on their own stuff. The same thing. Whatever you put into it's what you're going to get out of it.
Oh, yeah.
Whether you're going to get out of it being able to shoot more efficiently when you're on a 3D course, or when you're hunting, or when you're on a target field. You put into it, you get out of it. You should never rely on somebody else to do it for you. And as their coach, yes, for the really young ones, I'm setting up their bows. I'm doing everything. They're learning how it's going. But I'd say once these kids hit about 13, they don't need me anymore. They're actually just in my shop doing all their stuff to it. And that's something that the manufacturers, some of them are starting to look at like, well, it's a boon for them because they're selling more presses and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When I go down to the range, I see, unfortunately, a lot of people who buy into the hype and like, well, they're saying you should have your own bow press. Sure. Don't know the first thing they're doing about it. And I see bows explode on the range. I see all kinds of weird stuff. I've seen sights on backwards, and I don't call these people stupid. I just say you're a victim of a lack of education, or you're a victim of hype because you're looking at what these people are selling online and you don't see what else goes into it.
Yeah.
So, Dudley's one of those people who's been very big with that and trying to promote it. I just think that it has to be done well, and people have to have access to it so that they can get the training they need. And that's what we're trying to do now. But it's the same thing, whether you're building arrows or we're tuning a bow. If you are able to learn the basics of it, then things will start to, even stuff that you don't learn, you'll discover as you're going along, because a light bulb will go off. Wait a minute. If I do this, then this happens. If I put this in, then this goes on. And then you're on your own, because then it's what you make out of it. And you don't have to be dependent on anybody. Just like the person who introduced me to cigars, as I have one now, I didn't know how to smoke a cigar. And you try to be independent. And me at 53 was the first cigar I ever had. Yeah. Guess what? I was an amateur at it.
Oh, I'm still an amateur at it. There's so much to learn when it comes to smoking a cigar. I had those couple of New World cigars, the Olivar, and I can't remember the name of the other one at Liberty. And I lit up the thinner one that's like the equivalent of Romeo and Juliet, took a big drag and inhaled, and the bloke said, whoa, 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 you don't inhale. I said, what's the point of smoking and not inhaling? It's like chicks that suck dick and fucking spit.
Oh, my God. Well, as you see, I'm still not great at keeping it lit.
Well, that piece of shit of mine lasted about 10 minutes to Hamlet, and it was gone, and it fucking hell, it fell apart like Hunter Biden's defense.
Now, we're not going to go political here. That would give me too much to talk about. I
may not be a fanboy of many things. I'm an Uncle Donald fanboy.
So is everybody out this way, which how everyone's a fan, but still didn't get elected. I don't understand, but I'm not political in any way. Just leave it like that. But getting back to what I'm saying, like even when I learned how to smoke a cigar, and I'm still an amateur at it.
Yeah.
It's like there's certain things you can do and certain things you can't. And I'm not talking about smoking cigars. I'm talking about learning in general. If you don't learn properly anything, whether it's how to walk, how to run, how to shoot a bow, how to smoke a cigar, you're going to wind up with problems.
Yeah.
And most people are victims of their own selves creating their own problems because they listen to the wrong people or they don't invest enough time to do something. And your whole podcast where you talk about, well, you like how this arrow works and you're trying to see, what's going to be the best, get that one arrow that works for everything. If you talk to the wrong people, they're going to say, well, that's horse hockey. There's no such thing as one arrow, to rule them all.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. You can get away with one arrow to do everything.
I've decided on the standard diameter Skylon edge. I'm going to put them over an arrow analyzer to see if they're as consistent as the Empros and the Instax, because the Empros and the Instax have been I'm going to weighed the Empros. They come as a 33-inch length shaft. Fuck me, that's a long fat black shaft to have in your hand. That is.
Oh my God, you went there.
Oh,
okay.
You know me. I've got a mind. My mind lives in the sewer. It's a teenage mutant ninja turtle mind. It just lives in the sewer. But across a dozen 33-inch shafts, 0.6 of a grain of variance. Yeah. And these cost less than 60 quid for a dozen shafts. Mm-hmm. That's less than one grain on a dozen 33-inch shafts. That's a lot of carbon to match up, that is.
And the thing is that Skylon, I don't even know if you can buy them here in the States because I've never seen them in any of the catalogs and I've never seen a wholesaler for them here in the States. But I've gotten my hands on them before and I've tested them and they're rock solid. Never had a problem with them. I know some people who order them from overseas and they're great.
I've still got half a dozen Empros here. I've got to send to Anthony. I've bought another dozen 300 spine for the Kuma. But I'm going to switch that back to 6.5s anyway. Of course, the hunting arrow I'm going to use when I finally get over to the States is going to be a 300 spine gold tip ultralight Entrada with a 200 grain VPA three blade broadhead. I've tried them and I've only shot out to 25 course. First hunt, I have absolutely zero intention of shooting anything past 20 yards. It has got to be 20 yards and in. Out to 25, they are hitting on the money with field points.
Here's the funny thing about this. Like I get heckled for it, whatever. I've got it on video. I've shot deer at 100 plus. Okay.
You're going to find them at your door with the flaming torches and the pitchforks, aren't you?
You got to understand that and depending on the situation you're in, that may be possible or that may not. I would say 80% of the animals I've ever shot have been sub 20.
Yeah.
But you work on your skill to make it as good as it can possibly be so that if you had the situation present itself, and we're not going to get too much into the hunting part of this, but when I shot a deer at 100 yards, it was in an open field. It was quiet. It was not windy. He had no idea that I was there. and I dropped the bomb, and I'm telling you, he didn't notice it. It was on the way until it hit him.
Well, I'm presuming at 100 plus yards, the sound of that bow going off is going to be negligible.
It's not an issue.
It's not like shooting them at 20 yards where that bow, there's a twang and then a whiz. That's a double sound that's going to alert them something's wrong.
And the thing is that if you're shooting a super light arrow, you've got more noise than anything else. So we shoot heavier arrows that absorb all the noise, and then it's less of an impact, but it's more a skill question because you got to know what that animal could possibly do at 20 yards, what it can do at 40 yards, what it's going to do at 100 yards. And depending on how you set it up, it's going to be easy or it's going to be the hardest thing in the world. Like I said, most of the animals I've shot, sub 20, sub 25 yards.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, you're just shooting whitetail. This is where Troy the Ranch Fairy comes in.
Yeah.
I've been shooting heavy arrows since the early 90s because when we had aluminum arrows, if you ever weighed one out, they did not weigh 400 grains.
I say, weren't they all 500 grain plus when you were shooting?
When I found one of the arrows I was hunting with as a kid, I weighed it out. It was over 700 grains.
Jesus. I've got to say, this is really weird. If I'm talking to you and Anthony, I'll drop into Americanisms. I'll say aluminum. Normally I say aluminium.
Well, that's the thing that...
And it's fucking Jaguar, not Jaguar. It's fucking Jaguar.
Oh, don't get me started on the foreign cars, man. I'm not a fan of foreign cars, okay? But, like I was saying, they rip on Troy the Ranch Fairy because he sets up people for success so that he knows he's only shooting 20 yards. Do you want to take a chance you're going to lose an animal? You know, even if you had a 35-yard shot, do you want to lose an animal because you couldn't penetrate it? I shoot whitetail up here in New York. Whitetail are very thin-skinned animals. However, the thing is, you got to be prepared for a bad shot. Yeah. If something happens, a variable changes, and that animal moves, or a little bit of wind takes it, or something like that, you want to be prepared so that, well, you don't want to have to be saying at the end of it, you know, if I had a 500 grain arrow, I would have zipped right through it no matter what I hit.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not concerned about speed. Most people who are sensible about it are not concerned about speed. But then you have the other people who buy into, oh my God, it has to be this much FOC and it has to weigh 800 grains. There's a middle ground for everything.
Fair enough. If you're shooting Cape Buffalo in Africa, I presume you're going to need something heavy.
Well,
but when you're shooting whitetail, it's all about context, isn't it? What you're shooting.
I shoot the same arrow, and I've shot Cape Buffalo before in Australia. Something that I'll never do again. Stephen is a nice guy and the whole thing, and I love the people from his country. But that is a place that's designed to kill humans, and I'm not crazy about it.
I say every fucking animal there wants to sting you or bite you or stamp you to death, doesn't it?
Every animal there was imported from Africa, and it just made them meaner. Whatever survived over there made them meaner. A Cape Buffalo in Africa is not the same thing as a Cape Buffalo in Australia. In Australia, it has an attitude. It's bigger, it's badder, it's armored, and it's coming at you no matter what.
Those Asiatic buffalo are scary.
Yeah, I shot mine at 62 yards and put 3 shots into him.
Wow.
And I'm not kidding. It had my name on some kind of list, like, I'm taking you out. So the guy that we had, he was still standing there with a gun. He's like, this is a bow hunt, but I have a gun because 95% of the time we need it. And he actually told me, and there was 3 of us there, and he told me, he's like, don't worry about the buffalo. If you can make a solid shot, he should die before he makes it to us. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about makes it to us? Like, he's going to know where it came from. But we're really hidden. He goes, he's going to know where it came from, and he's going to make it his business to come find you. I'm like, great. So then he gets into, but we have other environmental variables, as he called it. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? Well, the buffalo's in the water. Yes. Crocs are in the water too. Great. Oh, wonderful. And crocs walk on the dry ground occasionally.
They can shift fast as fuck, can't they, Crocs?
They can run. And the thing is, I'm not trying to go so colorful with the language, but until you've seen a croc run on dry ground, you're somewhat lacking, because you have no idea how scary and how fast your life flashes before your eyes, because they run like a fucking locomotive.
Well, I saw a video of an alligator running across a golf course in Florida, and what amazed me is you used to seeing them walking along with their legs flat. They lift up and run, and that's a motherfucking dinosaur running at you.
And they're just their younger cousins, I call them, to the crocs. The difference between an alligator and a croc: an alligator, in my experience, is not aggressive and won't come after you. A croc, much like a Cape buffalo, will make it his business to say, you're my dinner and I'm going to eat you unless you kill me. So that's what they do. And again, life is about experiences. I've had that experience. It's not something I ever want to live again. I would rather be hunting a fucking T-Rex in the woods than go hunting a Cape buffalo again. It probably would be more fun. Probably safer, too.
Winchester 45-70, the only caliber approved for killing T-Rexes, according to... Oh, God. Okay, what's that? Come on, what's the dinosaur film?
Oh, Jurassic Park, yes.
That's it. 45-70, officially rated to kill a T-fucking Rex.
and people who are watching this right now or listening to this may be thinking, what the fuck does that have to do with archery? Well, here's what the fuck it has to do with archery. The same way when they say you have to be prepared for this gigantic animal who doesn't exist anymore to come charging at you, you have to be prepared for every situation you're going to face, whether it's going to be on a target field, on a 3D course, or in a hunting situation.
Yeah.
And Ranch Fairy preaches being prepared for all that. So do I. Some people take it to the extremes. They don't have to. But in the end, it's what you have to decide. This is my situation. This is the max distance I'm going to shoot. This is what I'm going to shoot. This is where I'm going to be able to do it. Now, it's very tempting to say, and over here we have the Total Archery Challenge. I'm sure you've heard of them before.
Oh, I would so love to shoot one of those things. They look amazing.
And the best thing about the Total Archery Challenge is they've brought so many people together into archery who you would never think shoot, because it's not for scoring. It's not for medals. It's not for anything like that. It's about going out there and having fun and also seeing what the limits of your skill is. And I think if more people did that, they'd realize it. People like MFJJ, he shows a lot of steps like, this is my bow I'm going to use for the Total Archery Challenge. And he explains why he's going to use this and how he's going to do it. And it's because he knows what to build for each situation. The same way you want to have one arrow, you can make an arrow that would work for the Total Archery Challenge, that would work for 3D courses, as long as you understand what the limitations are of that arrow. So if I have an arrow that's a 204 diameter, my limitation for that might be 60 or 70 yards, where I can get out there effectively without it going spreading out somewhere like that.
Yeah.
If I'm doing that with a 204, I can, because the 204 is what we call the magic diameter. It's
the mid-size, isn't it? The 5 mil. I've got some.
Yeah,
I was shooting the Instax, Skylon Instax 5 mil, and they were good.
And that's the mid-range, where it accommodates a lot of different facets. So it's like the do-it-all sort of arrow.
Yeah.
Some people, though, prefer to go a little bit bigger. And a little bit bigger, there's nothing wrong with it, as long as you know what it's going to limit out at.
Yeah.
And the only way to find that out is to test your skill with it and to see, okay, I know at 50 yards, I'm putting in a group that's the size of a softball. Fine. But when I get to 70 yards, that group is 10, 12 inches wide.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not going to try to shoot something at 70 yards, because there's a chance that wind may take it, or that I may wind up missing entirely.
Yeah.
That's how you have to look at all this stuff. Because if you don't look at it like that, then you just can't buy into, well, I'm going to go get a 166 diameter. Okay. I myself I use the same arrows every year for pretty much everything. with the exception of my target stuff. But for 3D, it's a 166. For shooting long range at deer and stuff like that, it's a 166. The reason I use that is because I know what my skill limitations are, and I know that it works at that range. But you can get just as proficient with one of the other sizes, and it doesn't make a difference. It's what you need to work with. The problem that you get is, again, getting back to the YouTube stuff. On YouTube, they're doing this, they're doing that. Well, come on. What do you expect? That's what they're paid to say. They're paid to do that.
Yeah.
So they're gonna use whatever is putting money in their pocket. I think that if there was a disclaimer in front of everything, we are using equipment here that we've been sponsored to use. Results you may receive using this may vary greatly. It said that.
I'm inherently lazy. What I'm going to be shooting is 3D, hunter field rounds, and some spots. My Empros, the good old 8mm shafts, they're brilliant for spots. To be honest, they're really good for 3D. I've shot them well out to 60 yards, but some of the courses I plan on going to, they're not completely wooded. And when you're out in the wind, I mean, it'd be what you call the 8-ring. I've managed to put an 8-ring on a goat at 94 yards with an 8mm arrow. And, the size of an Eastern Fat Boy, but there was 4 or 5 mile an hour wind. If that wind had been 10, 15 mile an hour, I'd have been hanging out his arse.
Well, so
that makes me sound
why...
like a member of the Taliban, doesn't it? Hanging out of a goat's arse.
So that brings us to what I wanted to talk. One of the things I wanted to talk about today, whereas whatever arrow you decide to get, there is a common thing that if you did it, you get the most out of the arrow.
Yeah.
So like you were mentioning, most arrows come like this, which this is 32 inches out of the box. This is a prepackaged arrow. This is Black Eagle, and this is their X Impact. Okay.
Yep.
This is a hunting arrow. It also doubles as a target arrow. Now, you can get them pre-fletched. That's the way this one comes. And a lot of people don't realize that if you get something pre-fletched, okay, don't assume that it comes out of the box ready to shoot, because you go to a shop, you have them cut it. These days, getting an arrow cutter is so inexpensive that people can invest in one of those and cut their own arrows and do everything. Because
I've
you think about it, working on your own arrows,
second hand.
There you go. So the thing is, what was once 20 years ago was an exorbitant amount that you'd have to pay for an arrow cutter. Now prices come down because they're gearing everything towards the home user.
Yeah.
If you are willing to put into it just a little bit of work, you can make any arrow work for you. And I don't care how much it costs, whatever it is. If it's a $5 arrow or a $50 arrow, the same amount of investment should be put into it to make it work. So like I said, this is 32 inches. 32 inches, and let's just say we're talking about just bare shafts you're buying. At 32 inches, you have, if it's a 003 or 005, you have the world at your fingertips to make it work.
Yeah.
Tim Gillingham has got many videos on how to measure them out, how to take the run out. And the thing is that when you spin an arrow, which is why if someone's going to work on their own arrows, they need three things they have to have, and they don't need anything else. They need an arrow saw. They need some sort of squaring device. Like I have this one right here that I bought from somebody online. And this is like a homemade thing. Most of it's 3D printed. If you look at it, they printed it out. They just put some bearings on this thing, and they put a grinding stone at the end. And this one, it sits right in there. It sits flat, and you can square off the ends. No problem. When you do this, so here's tip 1, spin it out. And what I tell people to do, and let me see if I got it here, your most valuable tool working on your arrows, it's not what you think it is. It's not the $800 arrow saw. It's not that other last chance arrow saw that has 57 different attachments to it. They cost $500.
I nearly shit myself at the price of that fucker.
Yeah. It is a $1 Sharpie marker. $1. If you're paying a lot for it, you might find it cheaper.
I'm just going to interrupt you for a moment, if I can, Angel. For folks watching on YouTube, if they're wondering why I'm keep looking away, my camera is in front of me here. My laptop is over here. So when I'm looking away from the camera, it's because I'm looking at what Angel's actually showing me. Yeah. So I can learn here. So, yeah, it's just the way I've got the studio set up at the moment. At some point, it's being redecorated and redone shortly, and I will have the camera directly behind the laptop. But at the moment, camera's here. Angel is over here. Hello, sir.
Hello there. So getting back into the tools.
You could see then I've got fewer. If I had any fewer teeth, I'd get a residence permit in Alabama. Oh, sorry if you're from Alabama, but you have got a bit of a reputation.
I'm not going to go there. So you need an arrow squaring device, no matter what investment. They all do the same thing. You need an arrow spinner, so something you can spin the arrow on. Obviously, you need a saw. But here's the other thing you need. It's a $1 Sharpie. And
I've got a box full of those.
Well, silver Sharpie or white Sharpie are the best to use. Do not use grease pens. They kind of do the same thing, but they don't work well as far as showing you what I'm going to do. But here's the thing with this. So your Sharpie, when people spin an arrow, they rely on their eyes to show them if it's wobbling. Okay. Well, the arrow, and all arrows are the same color. They're all black. Okay. When you're trying to look at something spinning, it's hard to see unless it's a really, really exaggerated spin from the run out where it's wobbling. It's kind of hard to see it. What I tell people to do is before you cut them, take your Sharpie like this and just mark the outside of the end of the arrow. So just run it along the outside of the end of the arrow, not the inside, the outside. So you have kind of like a silver lining on this thing. Okay.
Right.
And what it does is
I've got a top tip here. The first time I did that, I hadn't got a silver Sharpie and I tried Tipex. Folks, do not use fucking Tipex. I was using a G5 arrow squaring device and it clogged every single spin. It clogged the fucker up. Do not use Tipex. This twat did. Don't be a twat. Listen to Angel. Use a fucking Sharpie.
So I color the outside of the arrow, and I don't know if you can see it really well on this or not, but I'll try to get it close enough. Oh. And you can see that like the very edge is where I color it, right? So I color the very edge of the outside of the arrow. When I put it on the spinner and I spin it, if it's even the slightest bit of wobble, I can see it because now that color is bouncing in different directions.
You know what? I've never tried that. I'd only ever done on the very end for the square, and I'd never tried coloring the outside.
Before you cut, color on the outside first, and you'll see the spin, and it becomes so much more noticeable that you can see where all of a sudden it'll actually look like it's moving in a big circle, and it's a visual effect, but that's what it is. So by spinning it like that, all of a sudden I can see it. Other people will tell you, well, put it up against a piece of paper or a book or something like that, so you have some kind of reference for it. Well, that's what this creates a contrast on the end of the arrow that you're actually able to see that wobble in the arrow. And once you see that,
me backwards and call me Cecil.
The other thing you can do is you can at different points in the arrow, if you're thinking that, okay, if I establish that this part of the arrow is wobbling, right?
Yeah.
I want to know how far back does that wobble go? Because remember, when you're cutting down an arrow, 005, 003, I got news for you. 001s aren't that straight either. 001s, they're, depending on the company, their 001 straightness through the center 28 inches of the arrow. Black Eagle does it through the whole shaft. That's why I always like them. But you want to determine what's the wobbliest part of the arrow to come up for. So I actually mark little dots in different parts of the arrow. And people can say, oh, now you're marking your arrow up. Shut up for a second and listen. What will happen is you'll have little dots on the arrow, okay? And I'm going to get a better camera for this the next time. But you'll have little dots on the arrow. Guess what? When you're spinning it, you'll see them move around in circles too if that part of the arrow is wobbly. And when I'm looking at both sides, I know which side I can now cut off of. And sometimes you'll find one side, especially I find this on a lot of the higher end arrows, the wobble seems to be on the least bit of the end over here. and not towards the lettering. And I personally happen to have a theory that when they're going ahead and they're actually applying the decals and stuff like that you see on an arrow, whatever they're doing to press it on there, if an arrow is just newly created, may create that wobble by itself because they're stamping it on there, who knows, causing a little bit of pressure and creating that. But if you just mark at different points, and especially at the end, you'll see which side is the wobbliest. And then what you do is you just cut from that side. This got very wobbly. Sometimes you'll find it's got a little wobble on the left side. It's got a little bit of wobble on the right. Cut off evenly until you get to the point where you know you've got the straightest part. That's not rocket science. This is also nothing new. But how you look at it is how I've been teaching people to do it for years, and you wind up with a straighter arrow because of it. So if you're watching the spots, like, okay, I've got wobble over here. Well, let's see where the wobble is actually coming from. You may be seeing wobble over here because it's initiating from this side of the arrow over here. So you put it on both sides. You see where it is. You cut from that, and you wind up with your straightest length. You've gotten past that point now.
That trick with the dots, I'm going full Wayne's World mode here. We are not worthy. Oh, shit, I've just twatted me mic stand. We are not fucking worthy. That's something I had never, ever heard before.
This is not my own invention. This was taught to me by my teacher, who started by making arrows out of cedar and stuff like that. Because when you're in traditional, everything is more critical because no pieces of wood are completely straight. So you have to learn how to cut down and all that. But same applies to carbon. So now we've gotten to wobble out of the arrow. And a lot of people, unfortunately, think that it ends right there. No, it does not. So they go ahead and they square the end of the arrow. So they just go ahead and they rub it on there and they square it off. People, I'm going to say this once. I'm going to say it twice. I'm going to say it 100 times. No matter what you do, okay? If your arrow square device is good and flat, like you see how this one has supports on both ends, you have to do it from the middle and apply even pressure, and you must be rolling completely over and completely back, completely over, completely back. If you don't do that, basically you're squaring two parts of the arrow, you know, as far as the base of it, where it's actually going to touch your components. You're squaring only two parts of it. So we do the same thing. We mark it with the Sharpie now on the border of the arrow. So not along the outside of it, now the inside. So you're coloring the border of the arrow in there. And as you do this, and everybody does this, MFJJ does it, a lot of different people, Stephen Han will tell you this, you're going ahead and you're grinding the arrow down, and you may see, this is what some people leave out, you may see that you grind it down and there's one part of it that's still there, a little bit still colored. That does not always mean that your arrow is completely done. If you do that, that means that was the lowest part, and you just ground it down to where now you're almost there. You have to completely keep on moving it in 100, 180, go back the other 180, rotate it 360, keep on doing it until it completely disappears. Then it will be flat and square. But if you don't keep even pressure on it, so look at this for a second, and I know this is not a great camera shot, but if I don't keep even pressure, if it's just pressure a little bit up, you'll wind up what they call chamfering the outside of it, so that if you look at the edge, you'll see, you know, like when they use a router to finish off wood tables and stuff like that, they want to round off the very outside edge. You don't want that on an arrow. You want to have a flat surface so that your component can fit straight into it. What happens is if you wind up with a chamfer because you weren't putting even pressure around it, now all of a sudden you're going to have gaps around here. Well, guess what? Those gaps will start to weaken the arrow. So if it's just a little bit off of here or something like that, and it's got like a little bit edge pointing down from where you sanded it the wrong way, it'll actually make the component over time bend out of place because it wants to go where there's that open gap. So it'll bend out of place. It'll fly weird. The aerodynamics will not be crazy, will not be good at all. And worst, you can always tell these, and I'll see this from arrows that come from shops where people, I'm just going to say this, the worst time to walk into an archery shop is in the middle of hunting season or a month before hunting season, because they're cranking out so many different arrows for people that they don't have the time to invest in it. They're not trying to do anything bad, but the guys are rushing through. They got 10 customers waiting for their arrows, and somebody this thing, sometimes they may not pay attention to the little fine detail. Well, you can tell an arrow that's been through that when you shoot it into a bag target. If it hangs up on the bag target when you're pulling it out, it's because there's a gap in your component. In a target component, there'll be a gap and it'll get stuck in the bag because there's that little thing it'll hang on. And as you pull, you'll have it catching a thread or two. On a hunting arrow that has an insert, it's going to be the same thing, only even more pronounced, because as it goes in there, now there's a gap between the insert and the arrow, and any little fiber is going to catch on there. Aerodynamically, you're going to get screwed. That's all stuff that you have to look at. So that's why sometimes no one will pay as much attention to it as you yourself will do. So you have to make sure that it's all square and it's not chamfered on the end, so you don't have like a rounded edge on it. It's got to be flat against your component. Now, people do that.
Angel, there's something I want to ask you. I've seen a fair few YouTube videos. Do you remember the old Eastern aluminium arrows? You get a chamfer stone. Mm-hmm. That stone with a little tit on, just for taking the burr off the inside edge.
Exactly what it's for.
I've seen saying use those to square your arrows. Now, what got me thinking was they're just holding their arrow upright and doing that on this chamfer stone. If they're at a slight angle, aren't they going to have the front edge of the arrow like that? And I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, why are you telling people to use a chamfer stone as a squaring device? I was always told that little tit stone was for aluminium arrows and things like the FMJs. When you get that little burr that stops your components going in, it's just a chamfer the edge, not square the fucking arrow.
Well, it's the chamfer the edge, yes. And what people don't realize about those, and the next time that we do a video thing like this, I'll try to find them. Basically, years ago, I was shooting, what the hell is the most popular Eastern one that everyone shoots?
XX75?
I forget the name of it, but it was, no, when it came to the carbons, their first really thin carbon they ever came out with. Anyway, what would happen would be, it came with the chamfer stone, it came with the glue, because those inserts had to go inside the shaft. Yeah. So you'd be able to put them in there, and then you had different depths that people would put them in there and screw them up, whatever it is. But it would come with a chamfer stone, and you would put it like this, and you just rub it like this. Well, the problem with that is, it's like you said exactly. It's designed to take a burr off. It's not designed to make it flat. Yeah. So you still had to go ahead and flatten it out. The problem with the chamfer stone is it's just that. It's a stone. So they do wear out.
Yeah.
So the reason why they came with every order of arrows you got, take it, use it once, and chuck it. Don't ever use it again. If I see people who still have these chamfer stones inside their toolboxes and are still using them 10 years later. Well, guess what? If you look at it, they're not even on the bottom. They start to get a high and a low side. Now you do that and you're winding up with an arrow that's screwed up because you did it on a non-flat surface. And again, like you said, if you're doing this uneven pressure, something like that, where you're now screwing yourself up is on the inside of the arrow. So if you look at where your component would fit, you're going to see a shallow side and a deep side. And the shallow side is where it's going to be weak on the arrow, plus it's also going to lead to it being crooked.
Yeah.
So you want to make sure you're applying even pressure. And this is, like I said, and there's a flat surface where it's touching the component. Most important, people forget about this end. They think that the manufacturer already did it because there's a knock in there. No, take out your knock, okay, and do exactly the same thing. Flatten it out, do the whole thing where you're doing with the wobble, which you should have done when you're first starting. But again, you make sure that you're putting it on this. You'd have to adjust it like this one. Fortunately, I can adjust it so I can fit it in there. See?
Sorry, Angel.
So I can fit it in there.
Just getting photos for the socials.
There we go. So I can fit this in there and I can do this side. Again, it's very easy to apply uneven pressure and wind up with it crooked like that. So I want it to be flat. I want it to be level. And I want to make sure that I'm making this as flat as possible, because both components, the front and the back, affect the performance of the arrow. And people seem to forget whether I'm using standard knocks like this, or if I'm using pin knocks, that's going to happen. If you are using pin knocks, people, hear me out. This is not, my famous word is horse hockey, but this is not horse hockey. This is not bullshit. If you are using pin knocks, who are you going to trust to believe that that pin is actually straight on the freaking thing? Do you know for a fact that the manufacturer is checking everyone? It's straight. It doesn't have any kind of variation when you turn it in there. You can't trust that. So the same way. Greg Poole showed this on one of his videos, and we've been doing it for years. But the same way that when you're checking it for run out and you're spinning your front end, if you get some kind of setup like this is here we went over before. This is to check for arrow spine. But if you move it over and change positions on it, you can put your arrow in here and check the gauge to see if I'm spinning it at either end, at the component end or at the pin end, if there's any kind of wobble on there. And if there's wobble, you either got to check one of two things. I did my job and I made sure that my shaft is square, but no one says that my component is completely in equilibrium and completely square. Yeah. If my component has got an issue, no matter what I do to the shaft, it's still going to freaking wobble. So when I check these things out, a lot of times if you're building your own arrows and using pin knocks, buy 2 packages of pin knocks because of the pins, because I'll guarantee you out of every 10 or 12 you run through, you're going to find 1 to 2 that are not straight.
Yeah.
And if you have a wobbly pin, you're screwed. So you put it in there and you check both ends. I check the end that has the component because this little meter over here will tell me sometimes it's a component that's wobbling. So if you see that automatically you're getting variation on it, do the same thing. Take another component, put it in there. That component may all of a sudden be straight. And what you're dealing with is a wobbly component. And this is something that I heard on another podcast with Aaron Snyder. He was talking with T-Bone, who's been in archery.
I love both of those guys. Aaron Snyder, and they were talking about animal.
They can't figure out why, if you bought a shaft that costs, if you divvy out the cost of the shaft itself, the shaft costs $20, $25, $50. Why in the hell are you relying on a component that costs 15 cents?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like the manufacturer provides it, but the components are shit. So a lot of times you wind up going to a different company and buying components that are precision machined for that. In Target, we've been seeing this for years. Precision machine components are always better than the ones the manufacturer supplies with it.
Oh,
and that doesn't mean the manufacturer...
Bitanox.
Yes.
I remember a guy I worked with actually worked out gram for gram, Bitanox are more expensive than a Ferrari.
Yeah. So here's the thing, and this covers biter knocks, manufacturer's knocks. I don't care whose knocks they are. About 20 years ago, maybe a little less. No, about 15 years ago, I was at a shop and we were just there picking up some supplies because we were out in Oklahoma. And there was a kid there, and apparently he was a sharpshooter. So he represented the shop when they're shooting targets. And 3 of the guys there working at the shop are having him shoot the bow through paper and all that. And no matter what he did, he was getting rips, tears, everything. And they couldn't figure out what it was. So they started playing with the bow and all that stuff. Here's the deal, people. And a lot of people don't realize this. What is this? This is a plastic knock. Whether it's Biter or anybody else, nobody's making steel knocks.
Yeah.
Anyone who starts coming up with a steel manufactured knock, you'll have to pay me because I'm suggesting it now. But whatever. They're coming up with steel knocks, okay? They're not steel. They're plastic. Plastic knocks are a problem no matter what. They're all great, brand new. A brand new Biter knock and this manufacturer's knock have the same problem. Plastic.
Yeah.
And here's why. That kid that was shooting over there, so I'm listening to this for 20 minutes while we're trying to pick up some broadheads for one of the people that was with us. And I'm listening to it, and I'm like, I got fed up, and I just walked over there because I'm seeing these guys tear apart his bow, doing all that. I said, excuse me, guys, can I ask you something? Did anybody bother to check his knocks? The knocks are all fine. I'm like, okay, do you have more knocks for that size arrow? Yeah. Do me a favor. The same arrow that's giving you a 2-inch tear, put a new knock on it. Shoot it. Fucking tear was gone.
Jesus.
This is the problem. Knocks, like I said, they all, no matter who makes them or how much you spend on them, all have the same problem. The material they're made out of. Material of plastic stretches.
Yeah.
Okay. It wears out. So whether or not the center of the knock on the inside is wearing out or the actual material from heat or overuse or impact, it's getting to be weaker, something happens. What'll happen is, as you use it more and more, this widens up on the gap or something becomes weak. This is the part that lies against your string. This is where all the force is generated from. If anything goes wrong with this, you are hosed. It does not work.
Yeah.
So my girls religiously, every 2 or 3 weeks, especially if they're competing, we'll take the nocks and we'll chuck them. And we'll put a fresh set of nocks on there. There may not be anything that looks like it, but because of that, if I start seeing their groups open up and stuff like that, I don't let it get to that point. We do it religiously, changing the nocks out. I would say every 200 shots maybe is an average, because these girls shoot a lot. But if you change your nocks, if you're all of a sudden having tuning problems that come out of nowhere,
yeah,
I don't know, this bow was hitting perfectly yesterday. Change your nocks, see what happens. 9 out of 10 times, it's this little bad boy here is giving you the hard time. And it sounds simple. It's really, really simple. But there's tolerances that you have to work with. And if you go beyond those tolerances, all of a sudden now when you're pushing that, so this is the knock here like this, and the string is pushing it. Well, if the left side of the knock becomes weak, or the left side of the body of the knock becomes weak, instead of pushing straight, now it's pushing out. You wind up getting a right tear.
Yeah.
Left side becomes weak, getting a left tear. You wind up finding one arrow that no matter what you do, it's out of the group. Well, people go and say, I'm going to go ahead and just call that a cull arrow. It doesn't work. No, try changing the knock. It goes right in. That's that whole thing where you can do all the knock tuning in the world, but if the knock is no good, it's not going to help you. So if I can tell anybody, the key to setting up your own arrows, no matter what you decide to choose, it's square. Make sure that you're getting the run out of it. Make sure that you're checking your components. Don't assume components that you're getting are completely fine, completely straight. I think that this little gauge, if you bought it on your own, you could probably rig up something like this on your, by yourself. These gauges in the hardware stores are about $15, $20. They even have digital ones now.
Yeah.
If you get that and you do it on your own, you will see 30%, 40% improvement on how that arrow performs. And that 30% improvement, I'm telling you right now, it's not because you're shooting an arrow that's 001 straight. It's because you took the time to do everything, to put all the investment in it to make sure that you're using the most straightest setup that you can get. It's about straightness. It's not about what you're paying for the arrow.
Concentricity.
When we had aluminum arrows.
Concentricity of components.
Exactly.
There was, I referenced it in, ages ago on an episode I did. There was a study out of Australia where they looked at arrow straightness, arrow point concentricity, and knock concentricity. Mm-hmm. And all the results said knock concentricity is far more critical than point concentricity. Because that knock, if that knock's not concentric, your whole arrow's off. And they actually pointed at the knocks I'm going to be using on my 6mm, the Eastern Microlite Super Knock, because they're so short, there's such a small gap between the throat of the knock and the arrow. They're just more accurate because there's less room for deviance. And we're back on Hunter Biden again.
Well, here's the thing. For arrow accuracy, 90% of the game is on the knock end as far as what you're doing to it.
Yeah.
It's more critical with broadheads and longer points that you're dealing with target. Like, you see how long that thing is.
Yeah.
So if that's in your, so you can see it better there. If there's anything wrong with this, if this point is warped or something like that, you'll get poor performance. But the other thing that has to do with, and this goes to, now you're taking that arrow, you're connecting it to your bow. If you don't hear a fine snap onto the arrow and it's tight, where I look at it like this, if I put it on the string and I can't, just by putting my finger, knock it off the string, you have a problem. You don't want it to be flapping around on the string itself. So the serving is so loose that, you can just do this any way you want and it's just hanging like this. That's the other test. If you put it on the string and the knock by itself and it hangs like that, it's too loose.
Yeah.
If you put it on the string and it's like this, and it's completely straight, if I can go like this and turn it and it stays where I turned it to, it's probably too tight. And if I go like this and I can't take it with a little finger pressure to knock it off, it's definitely too tight. So then you have two options. Change the type of nocks you're using, which is absurd if you just spent money on nocks, or change the serving size that you have on there. Everybody should learn how to reserve their bowstring. A lot of people think if something doesn't fit, fix it on the arrow. Not necessarily true. If it doesn't fit, reserving the bowstring is probably the easiest way to do it. The problem is everybody makes that, oh, that's a shop only thing. Only professionals should reserve your bowstring. Not really.
How many people
I'm going to put
serving
together
their own
a
peeps?
video for how to do it.
How many
Yes.
people serving their own peeps? I mean, I've got to say,
They serve them wrong.
I have got to change the centre serving on the Prime, because trying the Microlite Super Knox now, they are a bit tight. It's not just a satisfying snick when it goes on. It's a snap as it goes on, a real loud click. So I've got to change the centre serving on the Prime to fit the Microlite Super Knox.
And the whole thing about knock fit when it comes to the string is not because, well, you want to just snap on there so I can just hear it, but also if your angle where the string is fitting at full draw is very, very critical, that can squeeze the knock out, and it could just be hanging on there barely, and it can fall off. I had that happen to somebody who came to me for some lessons, and I'm like, your string angle and that knock don't agree, and we wind up reserving it so it actually fit. But if it's like this and you fire it and instead of being on the string, it's come off halfway, you could dry fire a bow like that.
Yeah.
So you don't want that sort of thing. Now, John Dudley has one video and he shows you how to reserve. You don't need a $100 serving bobbin. You don't need anything like that. A $20 serving tool works just as well, but he does demonstrate how to do it right. The only thing I will add to that, I'm doing my own serving video also, is that when you're serving, because the string has as much to do with the arrow performance as the actual arrow does.
Yeah.
But when you're serving it, you have to serve in the direction of the string. So you look at where it's twisted, that better be how your serving's going. Some people don't see that and they serve backwards on there. That's gonna cause the string to walk, the serving to walk. The actual whole serving with any knock points you have could wind up going up or down and along that string after a couple of hundred shots. And then you're wondering all of a sudden why you're impacting high, you're impacting low. It's because your whole setup is moving as one piece. So your knock points are riding on that string. And if the serving itself, that's where your knock points are, they're going to float with it. You don't want that. So you have to serve in the same direction.
Serve the same direction as the twist on the string.
As the string is twisted, yes.
God damn it, every day's a school day.
But here's the other thing with that. Some people think that I can take one serving size and I can make it fit my knock by just serving it even tighter. That's the biggest mistake you can possibly make. And I've seen people do it all the time. Oh, I don't have 19,000 serving. I don't have 12,000 serving. I don't have this. So let me just take the same one I got. I got to make it fit tighter. So I'm going to crank the shit out of it as I go ahead and they're squeezing that string all the way down. Yeah, the knock's going to fit better. But you know what's going to happen? You're trapping all these twists inside the string. They're eventually going to come out. So what'll happen is over time, those twists will start to work themselves out. It can affect
Yes.
it can affect how the string performs. It can actually compromise the stability of the string. You have a string that all of a sudden pops in the center. That's why, because you put it under so much pressure. Now it doesn't have any free motion. The rest of the string is vibrating out. This is not. It becomes stiffer and it winds up breaking on you. You don't want that. So invest in a couple different sizes of serving. They're not expensive. You can buy serving on Amazon for like $10. Doesn't have to be. Now, I like BCY. It's what I use. Halo serving, if you can afford it, is really great. Whatever you use, buy a couple of sizes as you're learning. Reserve an old bowstring, reserve an old bow. If you have an old bow lying around the house that you don't use, practice on it regularly. This way you learn how to do two things. One, how to serve. Two, how to make sure that it's fitting right. But here's the other one. Do you know what the biggest problem is about reserving that people don't want to talk about?
No.
Okay. It's fear. Do you know what the fear is?
Fear of fucking it up and blowing your bow up.
fear of cutting the old serving off and not cutting your bowstring. So most people don't learn how to cut the string off. Dudley's video shows you how to do it. He uses a knife. I'm not a fan of knives. What I'll do is I'll take a razor blade, especially the duller the razor blade, the better, because all you're going to do is, if you have a brick or something like that, if the razor blade is brand new, take it, run it along the brick. You could definitely dull it up, and then just start pushing it upwards against the edge of the serving. If the serving's got a knot where they tied it off, especially start working on the knot. Yeah. You're not trying to cut down into it. You're trying to cut across it. But if it doesn't have a knot, like when I do servings, you can barely see where I tied it off and burnt off the knots. So if you're starting on the very edge, as long as you're tilting that dull blade up, it's more, it's less of cutting than it is of wearing out the serving. And once you get that first strand on that just all of a sudden pops, then put the knife away, put the blade away, and just start unraveling it by your fingers. Some people want instant gratification, like, no, I'll just cut this whole thing there. Congratulations, asshole. You just cut right through your string. And I had a guy come to me recently, and I was helping him out with his bow, and I saw him a week later, and he says, my string popped. I'm like, how did it pop? Oh, I don't know. It had to be somewhere in the string. And I see a new serving on there. I'm like, were you changing your serving? He said, no, I changed my serving. It was fine. And then it popped like a day later. Hello, asshole. You cut 2 strands of your own bowstring when you did it. I said, what'd you use? He said, I just used my buck knife. I'm like, are you insane?
Jesus.
Using a regular knife? I'm like, tell you what, why don't you just use a grinder that you use to cut cement and all that and do the same shit with it? It has the same effect on it. So people don't realize how much the serving impacts the performance of the arrow, how much your knock points. If the shorter your bow, and like I said, we're getting towards the end over here, but just throw a couple more things in here people can use. The shorter your bow is, okay? Now, some people in between their D loop, they put 1 knock or they put 2. I always put 2.
I'd say
Why do I always
2.
put 2? So I can guarantee that gap that I have in there.
Yeah.
It's the only case where a gap is good. I'm not going to say take that wherever you want. But
we're back to that fat 32-inch black shaft again, aren't we?
Jesus Christ. Anyway, today's bows are all shorter axle to axle bows, which means that string angle is going to be even more acute. But what happens is if your knocking points aren't spaced appropriately from, this is the center. So when I go ahead and I do mark the center of where I want the arrow to ride, I'll mark it with a Sharpie. But then when I set my knocking points, I want there to be space. So let's just say someone comes to me with a 30-inch bow. They have to have a lot of space. Yeah. I'm talking about sometimes an eighth of an inch in between each side of that arrow from where the knock points are. Because if they don't, when they go to full draw, it'll pinch right out. Yeah. And an old school thing that I learned from my teacher and that everybody here should try, especially if you have screw-on points, if you're not sure if your knocking points are too tight, draw the bow back without a field point in it. So unscrew your point, draw it back. If your knocking points are too tight, that arrow will lift right off the rest. Ah. And a lot of people don't realize that because having 100 grain or 125 grain point on the front of the arrow is enough to keep the arrow on the rest, even when it's getting pinched. Yeah. But it doesn't mean that it's not going to squeeze out. So try that and you'll see, oh shit, it's so tight that boom, because you see some of these videos, again, getting back to the YouTube thing, made by people who have been in the industry for years. And you see them tying the knock points on there and they're tying them like right up against the knock. I'm like, are you stupid? You can get away with that on a 40-inch bow. You cannot get away with that on a 30. Yeah. I would even say you probably can't get away with that on a 34-inch bow. These days, the cams are the size of saucer plates. So there's a little bit more breathing room. But if you don't do that test, or actually, if you're unsure, have somebody else stand and look at you when you draw. Just draw back and look to see if your arrow is squeezing out or if those 2 knock points are touching it. Because if they are, buddy, you're screwed. That's going to be bad. And what's going to happen is sometimes you're going to get, bad performance of the arrow squeezing out. It's not going to be all the way in. Sometimes you might just get a dry fire out of it. Yeah. The reverse is also true. If I have that thing and I can move my knock along the string like I'm playing a violin, that's too much. So you have to learn where it's comfortable, where it's going to be fine. Too much gap is no good, but definitely I can live with too much gap because all you can do is get random highs and lows.
Yeah.
I'd rather have that for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing than somebody who goes ahead and pinches the fucking knock in between two knocking points. And then all of a sudden the arrow literally falls out while they're aiming and holy shit, boom. They just watch the whole. That's why certain people, when I see them come to the range and I either know where they got their bow set up, if I know the shop they got it set up at, this one particular shop near here that I'm like, go with God if you go to that place because the guy's an idiot. And I'll see their bows. I'll tell my kids,
see God and back off.
Yeah, let's move a couple lanes over because there's a possibility that you might get hit on the side of the head with a cam in a few minutes. And last week, I had a new kid working with me the first time he had ever come to me. He didn't wind up becoming a student. They brought him to me once. There's such a thing as students who I won't work with.
Yeah.
And if you have a little bit of an attitude problem, or basically you're a wise ass, I won't deal with you. But even so, I still gave him the benefit of the doubt. I didn't want to see the kid get, a boomerang in the side of the head.
Yeah.
I said, let's move a couple lanes over. 3 minutes later, this guy took a shot, arrow, I guess, squeezed out, and a brand new Matthews, what the hell is the name of that bow with the four limbs on the top and the four limbs on the bottom?
The phase 4.
Went boom.
Oh,
the phase 4.
Shit.
Phase 4 became a phase 4 became a phase 24 because there were pieces everywhere. And I'm not kidding. One of the limbs, because his bow exploded really bad, the idiot was shooting a 300 grain arrow. I'm like, are you? And he was shooting 75 pounds. Like, are you out of your fucking mind? So it could have been a derailment. It could have been anything. All I know is the bow blew up. And one limb wound up about 6 inches away from this kid's foot. I'm like, if you were still standing next to this idiot when he was shooting, that limb would probably be in the side of your head.
I shouldn't laugh at bows blowing up. My Epics, I was holding at full draw and the bus cable failed. I swear I nearly shit myself. It blew the Hydra dipping off the riser. It was the scariest. I was wearing a chunky watch. That's the only thing that stopped me being hurt more. It sliced my wrist open. It was scary as fuck.
Thank God that all risers these days are either aluminum or they're machined, whatever. Yeah. Back in the days of the early compounds, there was a guy in the range I was at, and they used to make magnesium risers. And to this day, if I see a magnesium riser, I get a case of the jelly leg. I won't go near anyone with one. This guy was at full draw, and he was about to fire, and the bow broke and split in half at the grip.
Oh shit!
So literally, the magnesium broke in the middle of the grip, and the bow flew in two pieces like a whip. One went over his shoulder, and the other one hit him in the crotch.
Oh!
And I'm like,
video of that would have been priceless.
We've come a long way in technology, but we still maintain the same level of stupidity.
Oh God, yeah.
So, no matter what you do, it's never really going to change with that.
Mate, that bow made him a landowner. He gave him 2 acres.
Oh yeah, it definitely did. But like I'm saying, that these are just things that if the average person did them, take your what you're doing for your arrows into your own hands.
Yeah.
If you're the type of person who doesn't have the funds to buy your own squaring device, who doesn't have the funds to buy all these other things, that's fine. If you're having a shop cut your arrows for you, that's also fine. That doesn't mean they're not doing the right thing for you. But if you see performance problems, you have the ability to check your nocks to see if something's wrong with the nock, to see if the nock fits right, that sort of thing. And you can always get something to spin the arrows with. You can build them. There's plans to build an arrow spinner. Spin it. If you see there's a problem, then go to the shop, say, hey, listen, there's something wrong with this arrow. Can you help me with it? The way you approach people has a lot to do with how they're going to react to you.
Yeah.
So if you go and say, hey, you fucked up my arrow, I need you to fix it, they're going to be like, get the hell out of here.
Oh, straight on the back foot.
Yeah. If you tell them, hey, something wrong with this one, can you guys take a look at it? Because I don't know, it's wobbling, it's doing some crazy stuff. And if they're a decent shop, to be like, oh, sure, it doesn't take that much for them to look at it and say, okay, maybe we can chamfer for the end for you, do something like that and fix it. There's a degree to how far they're going to go, but if you don't have the funds and you don't have the equipment, you can still do that.
Yeah.
What I would tell people is this: if it's an issue of funds, and these days it's an issue of funds for everybody, what they should do is you have your friends who go to the range, pitch in, and buy a piece of equipment between all of you every month or something like that. Buy a spinner 1 month, buy a saw 1 month, and then have that in a kit and know that this week, this person's going to have the kit. Next week, this person's going to have the kit. This way you always have access to that sort of thing. Because these days, if that's the only way to do it, doing things together as a group will benefit everybody instead of trying to do things on your own if you can't afford it and just getting frustrated, which gets you nowhere.
Yeah. I'm just going to dive off camera. I'm going to show you my arrow spinner. I'm really lucky. One of my friends, Loz, he's an absolute legend. He has the most amazing man cave. It's in a cupboard in front of me. And there I go, twatting that again. Back in a sec, I'll show you mine. This is like the Rolls Royce of arrow spinners. Last chance. Fucking suck dick. There we go. Lot of clumping and bumping. Hang on, let's get my headphones on. I can hear myself again now.
There you go. Yeah, that's great.
That is...
It's square.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's beautiful, that is. It's like the Rolls Royce of arrow spinners. All thread, 2 pieces of aluminium and bone thread skateboard bearings, and it's fantastic. You know, I put a post. I put a picture of that things on Instagram when I first made it, and I had the owner of a shop in London say, "How much can your friend make those for?" But the amount of work that went into that, it's a £200 arrow spinner.
Well, there are plans to make arrow spinners online, and basically the skateboard ball bearings. Yeah. If you look at this one here, you know. This here, and this is from part of a kit that I bought for testing arrow spine. Those are skateboard ball bearings. That's all they really are on there. The same thing with this one. Homemade skateboard ball bearings and 3D printed. Their plans to cut 2 pieces of wood, put the ball bearings on there, cut the V, and you're able to spin it, sand it off.
Yeah.
There's no limit to what you can do on your own. So it doesn't have to be commercially manufactured. You get out of it as much as you're willing to put into it. Right. And some people take a lot of pride in making their own stuff.
Yeah. There's something I have got to ask you before you have to fly off.
Yes.
I mentioned first dynamic bend testing your arrow, where you look for the weak side. You can press it slightly. Some folks do it in bow presses. Others measure up and make a dead straight across a sash clamp. Just put enough pressure on to see which is the weak side, and they swear by it. They reckon it saves hours and hours knock tuning. Have you tried it? Do you rate it? Because I'm going to give it a whiz.
I've done that before. Well, this machine that I was showing you over here, that's what it's meant to do.
Yeah.
I'll show you here. So that's what it's actually meant to do, and you can actually see the meter and find where the weak side is on the arrow.
Yeah.
You can do it with that. You can use it with a straight clamp. As long as you have points on either side of the arrow. So you would have, if this is the one on the end, then you have an equal point on the other side. This way you have even points to squeeze it on. Years ago, Dan McCarthy did it on a boat press. So in the 2 arms of the press, you put the arrow in there, and as you crank in the press, you can see which side it bends, and that's the weak side. There's a lot you can do with that. Because of the tolerances that we're getting out of manufacturers these days, that will work. It'll save you some time, but not as much as if, so say you did that. I mean, people used to float them in water just to see what side floated to the top, and then that was the weak side.
Oh, that was just the heavy side where the carbon overlapped it sink to the bottom, wasn't it? Because apparently when I watched the video that Exodus Outdoor Gear did, as you cut the arrow, the weak spine isn't necessarily opposite the overlap, and when he tested it, the weak side actually spiraled as he cut it.
Yeah, the weak side would move. Now, depending on how your arrow is made. So look, if you look at this arrow here, depending on how your manufacturer does it, if it's extruded or if it's done on a mandrel wrap and extruded, that weak side could vary depending on how far up the arrow is. So if you try to extrude an arrow like this, it's not going to come out straight. As it comes out, it's going to turn.
Yeah.
So technically, the weak side could be in a lot of different places.
Yeah.
You have to look for the weak side after you've cut it to length for whatever length it's going to be, not at full length. That's one. The other thing is, depending on who made it, if Carbon Express, I don't even think they're around anymore, but Carbon Express arrows, like especially for the fat shaft target arrows, you used to be able to look inside, and I forgot who did it. Dave did it on one of his videos. Cousins. You could actually look inside. Yeah. And you could actually see where they were bonded together, where that seam was. And then you can go off that to find out what the weak side is. Do I think it works? It can in some circumstances, depending on the manufacturer. You may have one brand that it works on it, have another brand where it's completely pointless because, like you said, it wanders, it spins throughout the arrow. I personally prefer the Gillingham approach to it, where, remember what you're saying, if you're going to knock tune it to see how it does, that's how you find in the weak side. You have to make sure that the knocks you got are good. Yeah. So if the knock is weak, it's going to completely tune out weird. But I would do that at a distance of about 11 yards and just fire it, see where it goes. Fire it, see where it goes. There's a certain amount of user error involved with that, but you get better, by knock tuning it that way, you'll get better performance as far as finding out what side it's going to be on, because you'll know. But here's the one thing people leave out of that, and I'll do this before we go. Yeah. When you're knock tuning, okay? So I take the knock and I put it on here. I got to mark where that knock's position is. Yeah. Now, if you have a 3-fletch like this, the easiest way to do it, put your knock right here so that this fletch your cock vein is up, and shoot it and see what it does. Then I'll rotate it to the next one, have this one be the vein that's up. See what it does. See this one be the vein that's up. See what it does. Yeah. Just that little bit can make it a lot easier to see where they're going to group together. But the easiest way to do is shoot them. You can do it when they're still bare shafts. Here's the problem. And I know we got to go soon because I got to be at the range soon. But here's the thing. If you're going to hear everybody online saying, well, you're best to tune with bare shafts. Okay, that's partially true. Yeah. However, if your form sucks, or if you make the slightest mistake, a bare shaft will act so wicked and do so much, you'll be chasing your tail for hours. Do it with a fletch shaft. It's more controlled, and it's easier for the average user to do it. Do not do it with a bare shaft. You can do it. You'll be chasing your tail because what you think is the arrow rotating the wrong way, it actually turns out to be you who's making a mistake with pressure or something like that. People are not machines. The only exception to that is if you can do it with a shooting machine, like I have one, and I'll set the shooting machine up at 50 yards and I'll knock tune them to 50 yards if I want, bare shaft it out there, and I'll actually get to see it. Yeah. Is it worth the time and the effort to do that? Probably not. And I'll tell you why. Modern times, we have machines that are more precision for what they do. Yeah. The dynamic spine is going to be the dynamic spine no matter what. You can check the static spine, but dynamic spine is where everything is. Yeah. They're manufactured so well these days. Even the cheap stuff that you find are manufactured so well that really doesn't make that big a deal. It's the same way like when we were talking earlier. If you're going to shoot a $600 set of arrows versus a $60 set of arrows, is it really that big a deal? Probably not. The stuff that really matters is the little things like the components that will throw you off. You can't get all that crazy into it. If you're a world-class shooter and you shoot every point counts, those are the guys who are going to do that. And I've got to tell you, I know a lot of them and they don't do it. Yeah. So if they're not doing it, why drive yourself crazy for it? So it is something you can do, something you can test. I will caution you, however, remember you were saying doing that with like a pipe clamp or something like that. You're just going to put it in the middle of the pipe clamp and screw it down. Two things come out of that. Same thing comes out of doing it in a bow press. When you put pressure on this point over here and you have another point on the other side like this, so you basically have 2 points in the middle of the arrow and you're squeezing them down. what can happen is you can actually damage the arrow if you go too far. So damaging the arrow. So you see how long this is that this fits into the arrow, right?
Yes.
Well, imagine you're putting pressure on this. This will actually start to push back inside the shaft.
The side wall.
Dig it into the side. And now where you didn't have a problem with the inside of the arrow, now you do.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the arrow can't scream. It can't say, "Oh, you're hurting me." So there's no way to do it that it will legit, tell you like, "Oh, I've gone too far." That's why it's a great, in the theory, some people like it. If it gives you more self-confidence in shooting, go for it. Doesn't make a difference. But the fact of the matter is, today's day and age with those arrows, it really doesn't matter. So no matter your components and your straightness in the cut are going to be 90% of getting it there. The 10% is going to be how it fits on the string. Yeah. And that's pretty much all there is to it.
Awesome. Right. I've got to ask, before we go, can we have the world's first video? Don't be that guy.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. Well,
even he's asking, I'm telling you, he's saying, come on, a name like Angel, we need Don't Be That Guy.
Well, I can think of one situation, and all right, I'm just going to put it like this. So you're on the range, okay, and you see everybody, especially now, all the hunters are getting ready for the hunting season, which doesn't apply to you guys over there in the UK, but whether you're at a range, you're at a 3D club, whatever it is, doesn't make a difference. You're all there, okay? And the guy next to you is what should I call him? I want to be nice about this without going too far off. Okay, let's just go there. He's that fucking arrogant asshole who's shooting the $3,000 bow, and he's got the $600 set of arrows there, and he's looking down at you because, look at you. You're shooting a $300 bow, and you're shooting a $50 set of arrows that you ordered that probably came from China. He better not be that fucking guy who's going to throw that shit on you. But don't worry about him. Go through life just knowing he's an arrogant fucking asshole. And that's all he's ever going to be. But you, don't be that guy who gives a shit what he thinks. This is the problem with the world right now. Everybody gives a shit what other people think. And honestly, if you see the YouTube videos, you see all this other bullshit that people put out there, they're like, "Oh, well, this guy's doing this. This guy's doing that." Who gives a fuck? No one cares. If that guy wants to go ahead and shoot in pink panties and all that and say it makes him a greater shooter, are you going to do that? No. Who gives a shit about that? I'm not going to wear pink panties. I might want to wear purple ones. Purple's the color of my logo. I don't give a fuck about that. But this asshole's going to go out there and shoot in pink panties with his Hoyt bow and say he's better than everybody else. Does that mean that you have to do that? Do you have to go into debt to buy a bow that A, you can't afford, fucking arrows that cost $800 a dozen? No. Why? Don't be the guy who listens to that stupid bullshit. And especially, don't be the guy who lets what this asshole is saying over there affect you. Like, I look at people like this all the time. And they're like, "Well, I got the latest Matthews bow." I'm like, "Great, go fuck yourself. I don't care." Like, that's good for you. If it makes you happy, fine. It has no effect on me, and it has no effect on my kids. And occasionally, I get kids who are like, "Oh, but they're shooting this expensive bow." I'm like, who gives a shit? The guy can't hit the broadside of a fucking barn with his bow, and it costs $3,000, and you're knocking off little points like this at 50 yards. Who's the better person at this? So just don't do that shit. Don't pay attention to these people, and don't buy into the bullshit that you see online. Drop down my blood pressure a couple levels, and yeah.
So to Tracy, that if they ain't financing you, feeding you, or fucking you, opinions ain't worth shit.
Exactly. Because what someone else thinks is not going to affect you in your life, so who fucking cares? That's all it really is. And I think if more people thought like that, they'd be better off. I came to this conclusion many years ago, and people think, "Oh, well, he doesn't give a shit what this guy's doing. Like, he's not up with the trends." Like, I don't really give a fuck what you think of what I think. I don't really care. But in the end, I'm not the asshole who's bankrupt and doesn't have any money in his pocket because he spent his last dollar on buying a fucking knock that costs $22 because they say it's the only one he can use on those $600 arrows. But it's just how it is. Believe me, YouTube is a great place. You can see all kinds of things on there. They provides a lot more information than we ever used to have, but it's also the most evil place on the internet for people just to be influenced the wrong way, like a certain chick who shouldn't be on that channel anymore. Anyway,
you know what? I've podiumed at 3D shooting a Stinger X with Eastern Power Flights, and fuck me, that's rubbed some folks up the wrong way when they've got a full target set up.
Yeah, my girls have done it all the time.
One of the shoots, I didn't place it. It was my very first open shoot. I placed just below the top half. But one of the guys I beat, his arrows alone were worth more than my entire setup. And his full
point.
His full setup was worth more than my car, and I beat him by 120 points.
And that proves my point entirely.
Exactly.
So, you can't let what other people do influence you, because in the end, if they want to make themselves feel better by buying the $50,000 arrow setup, if they want to buy the $400,000 Ferrari because they're making up for compensating for something else where they're lacking, that's on them. I don't fucking care.
That's where they need to buy a fat 33-inch shaft.
I actually insulted somebody because they were, one of the kids was making fun of, like, this guy's kid was making fun of one of my kids. Oh, well, you just got that thing. We got brand new Hoyt bows. I'm like, yeah, and that's because your daddy is making up for something that he doesn't have in sufficient length. What are you talking about? He's got the longest bow they make. I'm like, that's not what I'm talking about, son. He's short somewhere else. You'll find out about that when you're a little bit older.
Oh, I love it. Angel, thank you so much for tonight.
No problem.
It's probably going to be tomorrow or Sunday when this gets up. I'm going to have to figure out. You may get a message saying, shit, how do I get the video off Zoom up there?
Well, Zoom, you get 3 different options to download it and all that. So you download just the audio track or download the video and the audio. Just download each independently and you should be fine. Superb. But yeah, post that up to YouTube. Let's see who I piss off by some of the things I said. That ought to be interesting.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure to have you on again, Angel. Everybody, you're one of those people that, again, you're not a gatekeeper. You want to get all that information out there to everybody to let's grow archery. Let's make everybody better shooters. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, no problem.
Health permitting, we'll have to do this again soon.
Yes. That's always a big question when it comes to my neck of the woods, but we'll see what happens. And then eventually I'll get all my videos into YouTube, or I think I've got 30 videos recorded right now that have to be edited out and stuff like that. I have one of my kids who's going to start to try to help me to do that. Whether or not they ever get posted while I'm still here after I'm gone, we'll see how that works.
Oh dear! I'll tell you what. Pearly Gates. When that time comes, you're gonna go through sideways farting fire, aren't you? I'm here.
I'm hoping to go in the other direction and be put in charge.
Yeah, they couldn't handle you down there, Angel.
We'll see.
Folks, thank you very much for taking the time to listen to this, to watch this, however you're digesting it. Folks, the one, the only Angel Garcia, it has been an absolute pleasure. Angel, tell folks where they can find you.
Well, you can contact us at highpowerarchery.com and see a bunch of the stuff on there. Our YouTube is the same thing, youtube.com/highpowerarchery. There'll be a lot more added to there soon. And I'm starting a new video series, Thoughts on Archery, which will be a little bit out of left field, but you'll have to tune in to find out what that's all about.
Yeah, and before I go, I've got to say, repping the hybrid archery T-shirt here, my friend Alex's place down in Norfolk. The guy's an absolute fucking legend. Folks.
All right, then.
Hang on. I'm just getting ready to get things going. This is the thing with video, innit? Everybody can see everything you're fucking doing. Here we go. Folks, remember, stay safe, shoot straight, and see you next time.
There you go.
Recording stopped.
Recording ended. There we go.